What's going on? The game reality's been compromised.
Megabyte has succeeded in stealing the core energy, which is now trapped in the game with us.
Oh, great! That means if the user wins, we're doomed. And if I win, we're doomed. Mainframe's energy will leave with the game.
Enzo is in the game, and he's trying to stop the user.
Once we pass that truck, we're in first place. Let's go! Megabyte? Frisket? I think we better find Bob.
Yep, that about explains Season 2 in a nutshell. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Mainframe, the Reboot Retrospective, Season 2. I live outside the net. Going through people, places, and shows. To this place, Mainframe, my favorite place to be. My format? I have no format. I am a user, creating things on the web. Reboots! When it comes to any TV show these days, something a lot of people don't seem to realize is that no series is actually bought out in full. Everything from cartoons to sitcoms are purchased for a particular number of episodes, usually the minimum being about 13, to make a single season. If the company that bought the show likes it enough or gets high enough ratings, they'll usually buy more, with some shows being so popular that they can go on for years. The reason that I bring this up is because right as the second season of Reboot was in production, ABC Network was bought out by Disney, who then announced that they would not be picking up Reboot for a third season. With that knowledge in mind, Gavin Blair and the rest of the Reboot staff decided to say, screw the rules, ignoring as much of the broadcasting standards and practices as they could get away with, while also staying on the air. Because of this, from Season 2 onwards, Mainframe Entertainment did their absolute best to push as much as they could into the show, not only adding in more story and better characterization for the cast, but also including a lot more humor, adventure, and even references to other franchises. That last bit in fact takes a bit of a life of its own, with Reboot barely going more than an episode without a nod to something that the creators either loved or enjoyed over the years. Getting into Season 2 proper, we actually jump right into the action with its first episode, Infected, a rather dark name for something that starts off with sweeping open shots of happy binomes and the sky turning a bright gold. We soon learn that what's going on is a system upgrade is being downloaded into Mainframe, and everyone is excited to see what possible new perks might develop from it, be it Enzo wanting a turbo upgrade or Dot wanting something for her businesses. Once the object lands, a cylinder that apparently is much smaller than the kind that would be seen over in the supercomputer according to Bob, Fong takes the download, Bob, and Dot with him into the core of the system to install it, having to power down Mainframe to do it. Of course, this wouldn't be much of a season opener without some conflict, as it turns out that the upgrade is actually Megabyte in disguise. While it's never properly explained just how Megabyte is able to mimic the user's upgrade, to the point where even Fong is fooled, despite what the Wikipedia claims, the virus is able to neutralize our heroes and steal the information straight from Fong's brain. We also learn that the keeper of the core here is actually immune from being infected by Megabyte. Once in the core control proper, Bob starts doing his guardian thing, fending off Megabyte best he can. A little bit into the fight though, Glitch's power depletes down to nothing, leaving Bob without a reliable means of fighting the virus. It's only through a command from a weakened Fong that opens up a warp gate that Bob is able to escape with Dot in tow, leaving Megabyte in complete control of the core. With no one to stop him, the virus instructs the computer to do one simple command: erase Mainframe. Throughout this entire bit in the core, we are constantly cutting back to Enzo at the diner. His only real contribution to the episode is to be in the dark about what's going on, and being used to show just what effect Megabyte's actions are having on the city, such as buildings crumbling down around them and the characters themselves becoming see-through as they're slowly erased. Back at the principal office, our heroes are searching for a recharge station so Bob can get glitch powered up again to fend off the virus, while also running for their lives thanks to Megabyte setting out weaponized versions of Fong's game pucks, designed to explode should they hit anything. When our heroes get surrounded by the bombs, it's only by draining Dot's organizer that Bob is able to use glitch to have the pair escape, though this also causes them to be separated. It's here that we see Hexadecimal contact Megabyte in the core, congratulating him on how chaotic he's making things. She then demands to know if he intends to erase her along with the rest of Mainframe, to which the virus responds with this.
Oh, come now. Would that be any way to treat family?
This is actually a really damn good moment, coming as a surprise to anyone who's watched the show so far, as Megabyte and Hexadecimal have been at each other's throats whenever they're in the same episode. Hell, the episode that introduced Hexadecimal to us even had Megabyte send her a bomb disguised as a mask to try and destroy her. Regardless, Hex is actually apparently pleased with this response, and talks to Megabyte about striking a deal, a 50-50 split of control over the newly remade Mainframe. Megabyte agrees, though as always he's simply telling Hex what she wants to hear. While the viruses are working out their differences, Dot finds Mainframe's armory while Bob ends up in the read-only room, a room that was introduced in a filler episode last season. The only real thing that you've got to know about it is that the panel that Bob is talking to will answer any question that he can ask it, and that it will almost never be used plot-wise ever again after this moment. Regardless, it supplies our Guardian with a way to replenish glitch completely, but while he's waiting...
Fong! Is that you?
You have what you need. Now use his greed.
Okay, Fong, what the hell? First you've got the ability to enter and leave a GameCube that's already landed, and now you're pulling the ghostly Jedi trick from Star Wars? Just how often are you gonna break the reality of this show by doing things that are never referenced again?
I reject your reality and substitute my own.
It's at this point in the episode that most of Mainframe has been erased, with all the sprites within the city, including Frisket and Enzo, barely having anything left. In a fit of anger, Enzo demands that Megabyte show himself, to which the virus actually complies, mostly to taunt the young sprite. This, however, distracts him from Dot, who's returned geared up in a giant exoskeleton that she had found in the armory. With the suit in hand, she's able to knock Megabyte around a bit, though gets a bit too cocky when she tries to crush him underneath her foot. She's saved from her blunder at the last moment by Bob with a recharge glitch, grabbing the virus while Bob goes to reverse Mainframe's erasure. Everyone seems to forget for a moment that Megabyte's a virus, as he's able to infect the exosuit, controlling it as it captures Bob and forces the Guardian into giving Megabyte what he's wanted from the beginning of the series, a portal to the supercomputer. Bob gives into his demands, only to reveal that at some point earlier, he had set up a fake portal in a chamber designed to erase viruses, using the greed that Fong spoke of. Seeing that he'll be destroyed, Megabyte decides to play his trump card by activating a self-destruct sequence that, since he's in the middle of Mainframe's core, will destroy the entire system. It's only through Bob ejecting the chamber that they're able to save the day, the episode ending with the user downloading the real upgrade into Mainframe. Infected is a solid episode to the start of the season, and it shows just how much the producers and artists behind Reboot were able to improve since the first season. Everything feels a great deal more cinematic, with sweeping shots of the characters, close-ups, and even off-center poses along with overall improved animation, especially to the characters' body movements and overall sense of gravity. While it still does have a few stray threads among the seams, it sets the stakes high and it shows that from the start, Reboot is going to be different this time around, downplaying the slapstick while embracing the action and adventure. We see this new focus mostly with Megabyte rededicating himself to his goal of getting to the supercomputer, or, failing that, gaining control of Mainframe. In the episode When Games Collide, the virus commands Hack and Slash to use a leech command to take energy from a GameCube to power a drill to get into the archives, the source and storage of all information in Mainframe. The attempt doesn't go unnoticed by our heroes, however, as the game inside the cube slows down to a crawl, allowing Enzo to defeat the user by batting his own energy ball right back at him. It's later revealed by the chief of Mainframe's military that the security of the archives almost went down, which comes as a bit of a shock, as the field is only second in power to that of the Mainframe core. Bob, suspicious about what's going on, immediately decides to check up on Megabyte, which impressed the ever-loving hell out of me as a kid. Most of the time in cartoons, even these days, the main characters are often clueless about what's going on when something weird happens, often being caught off guard when the villain strikes. Bob, on the other hand, knows that when something's going wrong, it's likely the cause of a virus, and Megabyte just happens to be the more active of the two in Mainframe. It's on his way to the tour, though, that another GameCube lands. Like before, Hack and Slash use the leech command to drain the energy from the GameCube, this time going to the maximum drain as per their orders. We've all seen enough episodes of Home Improvement to know how this turns out, as the GameCube is nearly drained of all of its energy. Because of this, the cube ends up crashing completely, making the user download another game into the system and forcing the two to merge together into one, resulting in an interesting combination of dinosaurs with tanks and fighter jets. Megabyte also appears to be stuck in the GameCube with Bob, however, and the user of the game, a giant T-Rex with a tank for a head, forces the two to work together to survive, though not without a double-cross from the virus at least once. Even with that betrayal, though, Bob ends up coming in at the end to save Megabyte from being deleted by the user. It turns out that the thing that Megabyte was wanting to break into the archives for was a gateway command, one that would lead him into the supercomputer. It's old tech though, which kinda makes sense considering it's from the Stargate series, so rather than risk his own bitmap, Megabyte decides to use the recently captured Enzo as a test subject. It works, but interference from Bob and Dot as well as Hack and Slash's stupidity end up destroying the portal, the Guardian pointing out to the virus that he owes him from the game. Surprisingly, Megabyte acquiesces, showing that for all of his destructive nature, he's unwilling to be in anyone's debt. With the gateway command no longer an option, our villain decides to go with Plan B in the episode Bad Bob, attacking the principal office directly and destroying the sub-spear that's floating above it. For some reason, that's enough for the energy from the core itself to come shooting upwards, Megabyte and his viral binomes able to capture it within a cylinder. Bob shows up to intervene, but only is able to get so much done before a GameCube starts to drop. Unfortunately...
Warning. Incoming game. Warning. Incoming game.
This is bad. This is very bad.
Inside the cube, which in and of itself is a full-on reference to the Mad Max movies, it's revealed that the energy is trapped within it, and if they don't get it back to the principal office before the game ends, regardless of who wins, the entire system will crash. It doesn't help that Enzo is trying his damnedest to win the game, only deciding to fall back once he sees what happens to Megabyte, being turned into a truck. The rest of the episode, for better or worse, is a race to get the Mainframe's energy and to return it back to the core. While the episode itself is well done and enjoyable, this is where I eventually come to have a problem with GameCubes. Even from the first episode, the cube's rules were never fully outlined, and because of this, we just get about every weird instance we can with them. Fong going in and out of them in Season 1, tears turning into portals when you're inside of them, the merging of games in the previous episode, and the warping of a game in this one. While on the one hand, it leaves the audience constantly guessing as to what's going to happen and how the cast is going to resolve the issue, I personally think it also harms the show a bit from a world-building standpoint, since we don't really know if there's some tiny thing that might turn the next game into a pretzel or something like that. I mention this mostly because it was while rewatching this season of Reboot that I realized. Normal games are a rarity. If we see a cube land, then more likely than not, something big is about to happen. Regardless, our heroes save the day once again, their actions even returning Megabyte back from being a truck. He would have fought everyone there and then if it wasn't for the fact that he was surrounded by nearly all of Mainframe's military. Even for a virus like him, there's only so much damage you can take. Painted Windows is an episode where we get to see something that's a bit unusual for an animated series to do. The same plot, but from a different angle. We find that Mainframe's archives have been broken into again, but this time by Hexadecimal. And immediately we get to see a distinct difference in just what the she-virus is capable of compared to her brother, as she's able to destroy the movie sign entrance effortlessly. She then infects the computer's paint program and goes to town like only a chaos-loving gal can. What makes this particular episode interesting is threefold. The first is the fact that it shows that, for all of her love of chaos, Hexadecimal can work to a plan. She takes out Megabyte and Fong first after getting control of the program, followed by communications and then transportation. Even Glitch isn't safe. It really just compounds how scary Hex can really be, since most people would consider her a lower level threat because of her insanity, when in reality she's probably the most intelligent character in the show, being able to outwit and outpower just about everyone. Not to mention what just might happen if you forcibly remove her mask. The second most interesting thing about this particular episode is how it forces the characters to think outside the box and into actions they wouldn't normally take. Dot, for example, has been pushing for the safety of Enzo more and more throughout the season, to the point where she even flat out forbids him from entering any more GameCubes. And yet it's because of the circumstances of this episode she's got to rely on him to break the link that Hexadecimal has to the paint program, something of a theme we'll see more in full next season. We also see Bob having to play on Hex's vanity as well as her attraction to him in order to do a job that he can no longer just glitch his way through. The third and final reason this episode is important is when everything is put right again, Bob actually has Mike the TV live with Hexadecimal, claiming that it's the best help he could get for her. While I'm more than certain it was just something he did to finally be rid of the appliance, it also marks the start of a change in focus from the creators. Believe it or not, this is where continuity truly becomes a constant in Reboot, with the actions taken in this episode leading directly into future events. That said, the result of this is subtle, and we won't see them for at least another episode. What isn't subtle are the events that take place in the next episode, where it's brought to our attention that now that Enzo is no longer allowed to go into games anymore, neither Bob or Dot have the time for him. As to why he doesn't find someone his own age to play with? Well, let me have Bob give it to you in a rather blunt way of exposition.
And he hasn't got any friends because there aren't many small sprites left in Mainframe since the Twin City was destroyed. Oh, I'm sorry, Dot. I didn't mean to...
No, I'm okay. It's just that talk of the other city reminds me of my father.
You have been friends with each other since before this series started! How are you that insensitive, Bob? Also, get used to this music you're hearing in the background. It comes back every single time something sad or depressing happens, and sometimes not even then. After blowing up at Dot about their father, Enzo runs off. It's only fitting that the scene immediately after this heart-wrenching moment is Bob teaching the binomes of Mainframe, and by proxy the audience, about GameCubes and how to survive them. This also serves as a proper introduction to the game sprites, the enemies that we see in most games that aren't the main cast or the users. Take special note of the artificial intelligence game sprites Bob talks about. It's after all this, of course, a GameCube starts to come down, practically on the diner itself. What's interesting here is that Enzo decides to use a loophole in his sister's rules. Dot specified that he couldn't run into games anymore, but never said anything about getting out of the way of one that was trying to land on top of him. This causes Enzo to be completely separated from Bob and Dot when the cube hits, the game being an underwater sea adventure. While trying to beat the user, Enzo ends up running into a young girl his age named Andrea. The two hit off to a quick friendship, with Enzo even claiming to be a guardian, and Andrea shows off one of her own special abilities by using her enhanced hearing to avoid a dangerous path. During this, Bob and Dot are trying to defeat the user, but it turns out the giant fish has gotten over a dozen lives. After burning up all their energy to try to take each one out, they instead try to head to the treasure at the end of the game to win it first, knowing it might be their only way to survive. When the pair ends up trapped and letting the shark sub get through to the end, it's only by Enzo ramming his own ship into the side of the user that saves them all from being nullified. It's here, with the ship filling up with water, that Enzo comes to terms about Andrea's true nature.
You're a game sprite, aren't you?
Yes, I tried to tell you.
I know, but I didn't want to listen. I thought you could be my friend.
After this little blow up, Andrea knocks out her new friend using her paralytic fingernails, just roll with it, and shoots him off in a torpedo, winning the game. Back in Mainframe, Enzo laments the loss of his friend when Bob notices an odd item on the young sprite's icon.
Andrea, you're here!
I told you we'd be together, Enzo. I downloaded a backup of myself onto your icon. The game let me out thinking I was you.
Do you see now why I said that if there's a game, something weird is going to happen? But yeah, from this point onward, Andrea is now part of the main cast, being almost inseparable from Enzo. The next and last 4 episodes of the season are considered by some to be a 4-part season finale, mostly for how one episode directly impacts another, with each ending upping the ante. While I don't necessarily agree, we do see a clear build-up to something big happening. And it all starts with Mike the TV. It's in hexadecimal chambers where the beginning of the end all starts. The she-virus showing off to Mike and Scuzzy just how easy it is to find a supercomputer using her looking glass, something she knows her brother's been trying to do for ages now. She gets bored though, and demands that Mike entertains her. Our favorite TV appliance tries his best, but when he switches to an opera singer, it destroys the mirror and releases something black with tentacles that takes a hold of the virus, infecting her. This somehow causes a signal from Hex to emit, alerting all the nulls in Mainframe, and even causing pain to Andrea and Frisket. This even draws in Hack and Slash, who are tasked with taking care of Megabyte's pet null Nibbles. I should also probably bring up that this is where we see one of the voice actors change, as Phil Hayes, who played the red robot Hack, left the series for unknown reasons, Scott McNeil taking his place. And while most viewers will probably know McNeil for his hundreds of other characters he's done over the years, both in cartoons and in anime, I will personally always know him for a particular role he actually does in another Mainframe series.
We're all gonna die.
Either way, the nulls surround Hexadecimal in an attempt to keep the city safe, knowing that whatever attacked and infected the she-virus is probably pretty dang deadly to the rest of Mainframe. That doesn't stop the corrupted villainess from trying to escape though, and it causes the newly named nullzilla to attack like its Japanese counterpart, destroying entire sections of the city. It turns out though, that Fong has a trick up his sleeve.
Do not worry, I have prepared something for just such an emergency.
You're prepared for a giant monster made entirely of nulls stomping around Mainframe?
That is correct.
How do you plan for that?
Lucky guess?
That, or you've read ahead in the script. Honestly, with how many times you've gone and broken the rules of the show by this point, I wouldn't be too surprised. This leads up to the true point of the episode though, as it turns out that this was all building up to one giant Power Rangers Super Sentai parody, with Bob, Dot, Enzo, Frisket, and Mike the TV getting their own vehicles, forming a Megazord, and fighting nullzilla. It actually takes Andrea flying their weapon to them to win the day, though, and it's revealed that whatever had attacked Hexadecimal is long gone. This is where the episode ends on a double wham moment, as Megabyte reveals that Nibbles is somehow his father, which then follows up with him getting infected by the same thing that had attacked Hexadecimal. Things immediately kick off in the following episode as Megabyte immediately attacks Bob and tries to get a hold of Hex. His hands actually phase through her, and it's revealed by Bob after knocking the virus away that Megabyte is trying to merge with his sister, who says that the result will be the next generation. This is also where Bob actually learns about the two being siblings. It's as the characters are halfway to the principal office that Megabyte catches up with them, grabbing onto Hex and forming into a new virus. Hoping that the virus might be benign, Bob approaches him.
I am Guardian 452. State your name and function.
I am become Gigabyte, destroyer of systems.
Gigabyte here is a bit of a frightening thing. Not only does he clearly have aspects of both Megabyte and Hexadecimal in terms of his looks, but he's also capable of absorbing all forms of energy, be it energy beams from attacks or draining life out of his victims. This earns him the level of a Class 5 virus, meaning it's something threatening enough for Bob to put out a net-wide alert to call for help. He grabs Dot after she makes a failed attack against the new virus, flying off on their zip boards. They don't get too far though, as Fong powers down the city to keep the virus from draining its energy, which includes their zip boards. They land in an alley, because of course, and are faced off against Gigabyte alone, with Bob sending Glitch away to ensure the villain doesn't get any more energy. Things look lost until Mouse appears, slicing off Gigabyte's arm.
Looks like he's been disarmed.
I get it!
Shut it, Nappa.
And flying the others to safety. Back in the principal office, everyone tries to plan for what to do against the new virus, with Bob having an insane idea of giving Gigabyte a huge jolt of energy. Without any other better ideas, everyone goes along with it, the Guardian going out alone as a distraction, while Mouse and Dot go get a tear from the energy sea. Dressing up like Gambit to match Gigabyte's apocalypse, Bob fights off against the Class 5 virus, though he gets a surprise assist from Hack and Slash, who both want their boss back. They lure Gigabyte to Floating Park Point, a series of islands that float above the majority of Mainframe, cause every series needs a floating island. These particular ones are detachable though, and Fong sends it flying off into the distance with the 4 on top of them. This leaves Gigabyte with no energy to drain.
Apart from us!
Seeing Hack go down, Slash gets so angry he hits the virus hard enough that it catapults him straight back to the principal office, negating all the work they just did. With Gigabyte right outside, Fong is forced to power down the shield so not to feed him any more energy. Enzo, Andrea, and Frisket also try to fend him off, but even Super Dogger strength isn't enough against an energy-draining virus. Right as things seem like their worst, Dot and Mouse return with the tear, tossing it right on top of Gigabyte. While this does give him a lot of power, Bob points out that he can use the tear's energy as well, commanding Glitch to use something that splits the virus back into its parts: Megabyte, Hexadecimal, and the infection. Bob expresses his worry about the third portal that held the infection, while Mouse secretly presses a small device on her wrist, ending the episode. You remember how I said last time how there was a major tone and color difference between the finale of Season 1 and the rest of it? We see that again with the second to last episode of Season 2, Trust No One, with the lead up to the title even being something like that out of a horror movie, something unseen and deadly attacking Al's waiter. Turns out, he's in a long line of sprites that have gone missing in the time between the last episode and this one. Bob's only now finding out about it just in time to discover that Dot has also gone missing, having failed to pick up Enzo and Andrea from school. This encourages the Guardian to go straight to Al's diner to figure out what's going on, Mouse following right behind him, claiming to have some unfinished business. After getting little info out of one of the rollerbladers who works for Al, Bob meets up with 2 sprites hired by Fong to look into the disappearances, Fax Modem and Data Nully, who, if you couldn't guess from their names and appearances, are actually a direct reference to Fox Mulder and Dana Scully from the X-Files. What's actually pretty dang impressive is they got the actress for Scully, Gillian Anderson, to voice the character. I guess that's one of the perks of having the production designers being married to her, I guess. Regardless of this, the pair sits with Bob, discussing a theory that Modem has. The X-Files stands in belief that Mouse might be the cause of all the recent abductions. The audience actually getting a little bit of evidence to this, as Mouse is talking to a person named Turbo, claiming to have found another victim. Modem continues to go on and says that he believes that Mouse might be a web creature, citing her fangs as possible proof, along with a bit of a backstory to the character, despite the fact that we'll never see Modem as a main character again after this episode. He talks about a time where he saw a creature before that he believed was from the web, and that only when he shined his flashlight on it did it ever leave, taking his sister along with it. While Bob is initially reluctant to believe this, when everyone hears the roar of a web creature outside and finds Mouse hanging over the unconscious body of Mike the TV, the Guardian is a bit more willing to try and bring Mouse in. The hacker is able to escape thanks to having the power of apparently being a damn good kisser, though Bob is able to place a tracker on her boot with Glitch. The pair eventually end up in the abandoned building, with the Guardian contacting Fawn to point out that they are dealing with a web creature. He claims it isn't Mouse though, pointing out the goopy black husks on the ground as proof, remnants of the beast shedding its skin. As if the entire episode didn't feel like a horror movie as is, the entire next scene of everyone searching the building is done completely without music whatsoever. It leads up to Mouse finding a series of oozing sacks that are all holding the missing victims, including Dot, and draining their life energy. Cutting her and all the other mainframers free, Mouse claims that she has got to get visual proof that this creature exists. Right in time for the thing to burst back through the wall and grab Dot once more. Bob and the X-File crew arrives to help, with Modem having figured out that the creature was weak to light, having him and Nully use their flashlights to pacify the creature. With everyone out of immediate danger, Mouse calls Turbo, telling him that she's got full confirmation on the web creature. Turns out that the hacker's been working for the Guardians all this time, whom Turbo is the leader of. Bob doesn't take this too kindly though, considering...
Do you know what the Guardian protocol is for finding a web creature in a system like Mainframe?
They have no intention of saving us?
They have every intention of destroying us!
Finding the bomb placed in Mouse's communicator, Bob races to the highest point of the city, getting it out right before it explodes, causing a huge tear to appear over Mainframe, and making us believe for a moment that the Guardian was also lost in the process. As Bob regains communications with the others, we see the web creature reacting to the energy and light given off by the tear, growing and escaping into the sky. As it hits the tear, it turns into a portal to the web, Bob saying it's time to prepare for war. The second season ends with the Web World Wars. The entire system of Mainframe is in a state of high alert as creatures from the web circle around, gathering information about the system. As citizens are moved into protected areas, along with a rather suspicious-looking penguin, we see all the other characters preparing, with Mouse and Dot in the armory, Fong in the war room, and even Megabyte building hardware to join the fight, Hexadecimal being its power source. It's not exactly your dream team though, what with the viruses obviously planning on double-crossing everyone else the moment they get the chance. Our heroes expect as much, but consider it a secondary worry, since if they aren't able to close the web portal, everyone will be destroyed by the web creatures, Hexadecimal and Megabyte included. Andrea and Enzo, while sitting at their stations and turrets alongside the principal office, discuss what's happening before them, worried because things have to be bad if Bob is willing to work alongside Megabyte. Andrea admits that the plans here seem to be beyond her, too used to her game sprite ways of see enemy, kill it. This prompts Enzo to come clean about his lie about being a Guardian, only to have Bob interrupt him.
Command line, icon, download Guardian protocol to version 1.0. By the power vested in me, I give you a field commission as Guardian, first level.
As everyone moves into position to ensure they're ready for when the fighting starts, Mouse starts her hacking to get the codes to completely shut down the portal. She also works to erase Mainframe's position in the web so they can never be found again, protecting the system from possible future assaults. Before they can get fully prepared, one of the Mainframe special forces, known as the CPUs, gets scared and destroys one of the scouting web creatures. This alerts all the others to flee and call in the attack drones. Try as they might to kill all the scouts, to get back to the portal, in which it's truly time for our heroes to fight for their lives. Though everyone puts up a great effort, the CPUs aren't used to fights like this and are losing a lot of their forces as they try to take out the attacking drones. It takes Bob demanding Megabyte to help out that the virus calls his own units, known as the ABCs, into helping fight. Just as things seem to get worse, with dozens of drones surrounding our heroes and attacking the hardware, both Mouse and Hexadecimal finish their jobs, making them fully ready to close the portal and save Mainframe. Of course, this is where Megabyte does his double-cross. Disarming Dot, the virus then is able to get the drop on Bob, silencing the Guardian before he's able to issue a command to Glitch. Megabyte takes the key tool and crushes it in his hand before throwing our hero into a rocket. It's with an evil look to his nemesis that the virus pushes the button. With Bob gone and the portal closed, Mouse and Dot make a quick escape while Megabyte commands for the ABCs to destroy the remaining web creatures and then turn their fire on the CPUs. Hexadecimal decides to power up the weapon once more, turning it now to face the principal office. Back in said office, Fong and the others are celebrating their victory, only to get an emergency call from one of the CPUs that they've been betrayed by the viruses. They try to contact Bob, only for Dot to appear, giving Enzo Glitch, the young sprite unable to take the realization that Bob is no longer with them. The moment of silence that the characters have for their friend is interrupted by Megabyte and Hexadecimal calling them through a vid window, demanding their unconditional surrender now that their forces have been decimated and they have no Guardian. That's when Andrea points out that Mainframe does have a Guardian, before turning to Enzo.
I am Guardian Matrix, charged with defending this system. 2 viruses take over my home? I don't think so!
As I said before, Disney had flat out stated that they would not be renewing Reboot for a 3rd season, so in an attempt to interest outside parties, Mainframe Entertainment left the series off on a cliffhanger, hoping that fans would be dedicated enough to the show to encourage a push to get the show into syndication. That said, I think we've all seen our fair share of shows that have tried to interest its audience with a cliffhanger ending, only to not go anywhere with it afterwards. We wouldn't see anything from the world of Reboot for a good year, leaving some to believe that the series was over with completely. But we'll get more into detail about that next time. When it comes to comparing the 2 seasons, it's actually almost a case study of the state of storytelling in cartoons at the time. Season 1 was a lot like your traditional Saturday morning cartoon from the early 90s. There wasn't any ongoing story between episodes, villains seemed to be there more to give the characters some conflict, and overall stories revolved around weird tropes that have been seen and done a million times, such as the young kid character wishing he was smarter than everyone else, only for that lesson to horribly go wrong. Season 2, on the other hand, reflects where cartoons were going and that we have more of today. We saw our characters grow and change over the course of the season, with episodes that connected over half the season that told a full story that you could easily miss out on. Our villain became a constant presence and had focused goals, with our heroes having to overcome weaknesses and grow stronger to defeat him, and each episode felt like a natural progression from the last one. The show stopped relying completely on the traditional tropes that other cartoons had locked themselves in, and explored just what could be done within the world of Mainframe. We actually see this a lot in the characters and how they're handled, with most of the cast growing and changing in some ways, with those who didn't either getting more focus or more screen time to really show their stuff. Megabyte is probably one of the better examples of this. The virus returns to his original goal from the first episode of the season, trying to get access to the supercomputer, or, failing that, gaining control of Mainframe itself. This leads him into attacking the principal office directly a lot more often than he did in the original series, where he felt more like an afterthought. Megabyte also shows a great deal more willingness to get his own hands dirty, often being in the center of a confrontation, though whether this is because of his eagerness to get what he desires, or him losing patience with his bumbling henchmen is unclear. Speaking of henchmen, Hack and Slash surprisingly get a little bit of development as well. Before, they were just idiots through and through, with their only real defining feature was their insane strength level being almost on par with Megabyte himself. Here, though, we see that they actually have a surprising amount of loyalty to the virus, willingly working with Bob to try and figure out what Gigabyte had done to their boss. The pair also seem to show a brotherly relationship with each other, getting on each other's nerves and fighting while at the same time caring deeply for their counterpart. When it comes to Hexadecimal, her role in the series is actually very much improved between the seasons. While she's still regarded as a lower level threat in the series when compared to her brother, to the point where even the show makes fun of this fact.
Very strange. The signal is being emitted from lost angles.
Megabyte!
Hexadecimal, Bob.
It's still driven home that Hex is someone not to take lightly, and is much more capable of system-wide destruction when she desires it. Despite this, the She virus seems more to be evil for the fun of it all, rather than any real malicious intent, only really getting dangerous to the heroes when Megabyte's involved. What really makes her a bit more interesting to watch, though, is her obvious attraction to Bob. More than anyone, Hexadecimal seems to let her guard down the most around him, and even the Guardian is aware of this, stating that she trusts him right after the whole nullzilla fiasco. There are times where she even seems willing to be peaceful. At least until her desire for chaos comes back around. Now, with more than a single episode to her name, we really get a good hold on just what kind of woman Mouse is. More than a bit of a flirt, particularly with Bob, Mouse shows that she's a very intelligent and resourceful sprite, easily living up to her hacker title. She's also a character who places a high value on loyalties, despite her status as a hired gun, and is the kind of person who is reluctant to trust anyone who's broken that loyalty. We actually see this when she describes her feelings about her previous employers after the web portal's been opened.
I've worked with viruses before and been double-crossed every time. I don't trust them anymore, and I trust those Guardians.
What perhaps makes Mouse the most interesting among the characters is that she's very much a good character who's willing to go outside the rules to get her job done. Whereas Bob has his code and Dot has her respect for the rules, Mouse doesn't care to restrict herself as much, and when push comes to shove, the hacker is more than capable of supplying her own expertise to help out in the fight. Andrea, spelt with the letters AI in her name being capitalized by the way, is a bit of a fish out of water if you pardon the pun. As a game sprite, she knows nothing about the world of Mainframe, or anything like it for that matter, making her effectively a stand-in for new viewers in the audience. It lets the cast explain some of the in-depth aspects of the world of Reboot without people going, shouldn't all these characters know this already? Heck, her premiere episode even had Bob teaching all the locals more about GameCubes. Because of this, and the fact that she doesn't get much screen time, mean that we really don't know much about her. Other than, of course, that she's eager to help, and she's hopelessly attached to Enzo. Speaking of the Matrix boy, Enzo starts growing out of his little kid tendencies throughout the season, for both good and ill. He starts to take situations a little bit more seriously and not treating everything as an adventure, especially when something big happens, such as when Hexadecimal got access to the Paint program. Enzo also shows that he's not always the happy sprite we're used to, when it shows just how upset he is about not having anyone else to play with thanks to the Twin City being destroyed, along with most of its inhabitants. The young Matrix is slowly maturing, however, and we see him using both aspects of Dot and Bob in his actions, both reacting fast to specific situations while also thinking when it's needed. Being made a Guardian was a pivotal point for Enzo, as it marked him as being mature enough to accept the same responsibility that Bob does, protecting the system and being a hero. That's not to say things are going to be easy for him though, as Dot takes the increased threat to her brother's life a bit more seriously. I'm not sure at what exact point Dot becomes overprotective of Enzo, but the effect is there nonetheless, the woman flat out forbidding her little brother from even going into any more GameCubes. She even goes after Bob more than once about telling Enzo stories about the supercomputer, knowing that it's such adventurous tales that encourages the young sprite to go wild. We also see Dot become a bit more active when it comes to protecting Mainframe, such as when she attacked Gigabyte head-on. What's perhaps the most interesting development with her is Dot's relationship with Mouse of all people. When the two first met, Dot was a bit more than suspicious of her and had a distinct dislike of how close she and Bob were. After a few episodes, though, it's become clear that the two have a deep respect for each other, specifically as Dot has proven herself to be just as trustworthy as Bob in the hacker's eyes. That brings us to the main hero himself, and Bob actually hasn't so much changed since the first season, as he's shown more about himself and the Guardians. The first and foremost thing to note would be the fact that the Guardians, for all of Bob's talk of to mend and defend, actually have a protocol to destroy a system to save everyone else. This shows that while they're about protecting people, they're more than willing to sacrifice a select few to save the greater whole. Bob himself seems to disagree with this, though, as he will willingly allow himself to be deleted if that means the continued survival and safety of those he cares about. He also seems to have a different mind of things than Dot when it comes to Enzo, believing the young sprite is more than capable of taking care of himself. You can easily hear the pride in Bob's voice when he makes Enzo a cadet, believing the young boy will make him proud. Too bad about him being shot off into the web, though. Overall, the second season of Reboot was a giant improvement to the first, allowing us to learn more about our favorite characters while at the same time improving the CGI they were using. There are still few hiccups here and there, both in the animation and storytelling departments, but there was an obvious heart from the creators when making an entertaining show that wasn't bogged down with rules and regulations. We will see this in full when we come back next time, when Reboot is completely free from the shackles of the censors and allows itself to become much darker. Viruses loom above, enemies are commonplace, and all we have is a young boy to defend us all in Season 3.
Ah, excellent. Proceed with Phase 3 at once.
Phase 3 it is, then!
What is Phase 3 again, Hack?
Read him a story and put him to bed.